Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, slow delve into a quiet corner of medieval European life. A topic so subtle, yet so pervasive, it might just make you rethink the simplest of gestures. We're going to explore the curious case of medieval European left-handedness. Now, imagine doing all of this with your left hand. In a world where being right-handed was not just the norm, but often the enforced, divinely preferred way. You probably won't survive the mental image without feeling a strange pang of sympathy for all the medieval lefties out there. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to a bustling medieval village, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the distant bleating of sheep. People move about their daily chores, stirring pots, hammering at anvils, or drawing water from the well. You notice how almost instinctively everyone seems to favor their right hand. When they greet each other, it's with the right. When they eat, it's the right hand that brings the food to the mouth. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a reflection of a deeply ingrained cultural bias. A mainstream historical fact is that throughout much of medieval Europe, left-handedness was widely viewed with suspicion, prejudice, and even outright hostility. Take the Latin sinister, meaning left, which has given us our modern English word associated with evil or ill omen. This linguistic bias was not accidental. It reflected a pervasive cultural sentiment. Now for a quirky tidbit. This bias wasn't just linguistic. It was also visual, depicted using their right hand. The left hand, when shown in significant gestures, was often associated with negative figures, like demons or those engaged in illicit activities. Imagine a medieval person surrounded by these subtle and overt messages, trying to navigate a world that seemed designed entirely for the right-handed. It's enough to make you feel a bit awkward just thinking about it, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the negative perception of left-handedness was primarily rooted in ancient superstitions and religious doctrines, or if it also stemmed from practical difficulties in a world built for right-handed tools and activities. Feel like a quiet act of defiance against a world that constantly nudged you towards conformity. You'd certainly think twice about reaching for something with your left hand. While they certainly didn't have neuroanatomy, the medieval understanding of the human body and spirit undoubtedly contributed to their biases, even if unknowingly linked to the mysterious workings of the brain's hemispheres and bias. A mainstream historical fact is that approximately 10 to 12% of the global population is naturally left-handed, a trait largely determined by genetics and, subtly, by early developmental factors affecting brain lateralization. This percentage has remained remarkably consistent across historical periods and cultures, suggesting a biological predisposition rather than a cultural fad. Lefties. Imagine a small percentage of children, despite all societal nudges, instinctively reaching for a spoon or a tool with their left hand, a quiet defiance of deeply held beliefs. Now for a quirky tidbit. Medieval thinkers, lacking our modern understanding of neuroscience, often attributed physical traits, including handedness, to spiritual or humoral imbalances. The left side of the body was sometimes associated with cold, damp humors, or even seen as weaker or less pure than the right. This provided a pseudoscientific, or at least philosophical, justification for the existing prejudice. Imagine a medieval physician explaining that your left-handedness was due to an excess of melancholy humor, making you ponder if a different diet or a good bleed might cure your condition. It sounds rather uncomfortable, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the medieval philosophical and religious interpretations of handedness developed independently from practical observations of human behavior, or if they were created to justify an already existing societal preference for the right hand. Was the bias purely symbolic, or did it arise from the practical dominance of right-handedness in tool-making? Regardless, the perceived biological basis, however flawed, added another layer of conviction to the widespread notion that right was inherently correct and left was, well, sinister. You would feel the invisible weight of these societal expectations, a constant pressure to conform to a natural inclination that was deemed unnatural, simply because of which side of your brain held sway. As you contemplate the biological and philosophical biases against left-handedness, your thoughts might drift to one of the most intellectually demanding professions of the medieval era, that of the scribe. Here, in the quiet, meticulously ordered world of writing and scribes, with quill pens, which were cut and prepared in a specific way that favored right-handed users, the ink flowed smoothly as a right-handed person pulled the quill across the parchment, minimizing smudging. For a left-handed scribe, pushing the quill across the page would often lead to unsightly smudges, especially with fast-drying inks and the delicate nature of parchment. You would see a right-handed scribe's hand moving gracefully from left to right, creating beautiful, unblemished script. Imagine, then, the frustration of a left-handed scribe, constantly smudging their carefully crafted letters, their beautiful work marred by an involuntary smear. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while some left-handed scribes undoubtedly learned to adapt, perhaps by adopting an awkward hook posture, curling their hand over the top of the text to pull the pen, or by using specialized techniques, many were simply forced to write with their right hand from an early age. This correction was often a standard part of their training. After day, to hold the quill in his right hand, a constant re-education of his innate inclination. It sounds like a rather tedious and uncomfortable form of ancient occupational therapy, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the physical challenges of left-handed writing were the primary reason for forced correction, or if it was predominantly driven by the pervasive cultural and religious prejudices against the left hand, scratching of quills, and the occasional frustrated sigh as a natural left-hander wrestled with a tool designed against them. The very act of writing, a symbol of knowledge and piety, became a daily test of conformity for the medieval lefty. From the quiet discipline of the scriptorium, your thoughts inevitably turn to a far more volatile medieval arena, the battlefield. How did swords and shield hands factor into the life, and indeed the survival, of a left-handed individual in an era where martial prowess often dictated destiny? ADVANTAGEA, mainstream historical fact is that medieval combat, swords, shields, and even armor were typically crafted with a right-handed bias, with sword hilts shaped for a right grip and shield straps configured for the left arm, held by the non-dominant hand to protect the dominant sword arm. You would See knights and soldiers training, their right arms swinging broadswords, their left arms expertly maneuvering shields. For a left-handed fighter, this meant either adapting to a right-handed world or developing a unique, less conventional fighting style. Now for a quirky tidbit. While left-handedness was generally a disadvantage in a right-handed fighting world, a skilled left-handed combatant could sometimes possess a surprising, almost unsettling advantage: novelty. Opponents accustomed to fighting right-handers would find a left-handed fighter's movements unpredictable and disorienting. A left-handed sword swing might come from an unexpected angle, throwing a right-handed opponent off balance. Imagine a knight, confident in his training, suddenly facing an opponent whose every move felt slightly wrong, forcing him to adjust his entire strategy on the fly. It could be a deadly surprise, couldn't it? Historians still argue whether the inherent surprise factor of a left-handed fighter truly conferred a significant advantage in medieval combat, or if the challenges of finding appropriate equipment and training effectively negated it. Was it a rare tactical edge, or just an added difficulty? Regardless, the life of a left-handed warrior would have been a constant adaptation. You would hear the clang of steel, the grunt of effort and sense, the swift, decisive movements of combat. For the lefty on the battlefield, every swing, every block was a quiet testament to their unique way of navigating a world quite literally built against them, perhaps occasionally enjoying the bewildered look on an opponent's face. Beyond the clash of swords and the quiet scratch of quills, the challenges for the medieval left-hander permeated even the most mundane aspects of daily existence: the tools and trades. Imagine trying to earn your living in a world where every implement, from the humble spoon to the intricate loom, was designed for your non-dominant hand. A mainstream historical fact is that tools throughout medieval Europe, particularly those used in crafts and daily chores, were almost exclusively designed for right-handed use. Think of scythes for harvesting, chisels for carving wood or stone, looms for weaving, or even simple kitchen knives. The ergonomics, the balance, the very way they were held and operated assumed a right-dominant user. You would observe a craftsman effortlessly wielding his tools, their movements fluid and practiced. Imagine, then, a left-handed individual trying to use that same tool, perhaps awkwardly twisting their wrist, or having to use more force, leading to slower work or even injury. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some trades, by their very nature, would have presented unique difficulties. A cooper, shaping barrels, might find his tools uncooperative. A blacksmith, hammering at an anvil, might struggle with the natural swing. Existing tools, through clever modifications or developed highly idiosyncratic techniques. Imagine a left-handed carpenter, instead of pushing a saw, learning to pull it with incredible precision, or a baker kneading dough with an unusual yet effective counterclockwise motion. It sounds like a constant dance of adaptation, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the practical difficulties posed by right-handed tools were a significant factor in discouraging or marginalizing left-handed individuals from certain trades, or if cultural prejudice was the primary barrier. Was it physical inconvenience or social pressure? Regardless, the daily grind for a medieval left-hander would have been a constant reminder of their difference. You would hear the rhythmic clang of a hammer, the satisfying thud of an axe, and sense the practiced ease of right-handed labor. For the lefty, these sounds might be accompanied by a quiet frustration, a constant negotiation with a world that offered no easy grip for their natural inclination. Every task, no matter how simple, became a subtle challenge, a testament to their quiet perseverance beyond the practical challenges in trades and daily tasks. The medieval left-hander also navigated a pervasive landscape of everyday superstitions. These were not just idle whispers. They were deeply held folk beliefs that often attached negative omens and ill luck to anything associated with the left side. You see, being left-handed could sometimes feel like carrying a small, invisible cloud of bad fortune. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval European cultures associated the left side with evil, misfortune, or the devil. For example, a common superstition was that the devil sat on one's left shoulder, whispering temptations. Dreams dreamt on one's left side were sometimes believed to be ill omens. You would witness people subtly adjusting their movements to avoid passing on the left, or perhaps spitting over their left shoulder to ward off evil. Imagine a naturally left-handed person trying to avoid these everyday pitfalls, constantly aware of their sinister side. Now for a quirky tidbit, some very specific, charmingly absurd superstitions revolved around left-handedness itself. It was sometimes believed that left-handed people were more prone to witchcraft or possessed by evil spirits. In some rural communities, finding a four-leaf clover with your left hand was thought to bring exceptionally good luck, almost as if to counteract the inherent bad luck of the hand itself. Imagine a left-handed individual having to navigate these contradictory beliefs, simultaneously a potential harbinger of ill omen and a rare conduit for exceptional fortune. It certainly added a layer of mystical complexity to their lives, didn't it? Historians still argue whether these superstitions were a natural outgrowth of ancient dualistic beliefs, right, good, left, bad, or if they developed as a way to socially reinforce conformity to right-handedness. Was it inherent mystical belief or a clever social control mechanism? Regardless, for a medieval left-hander, every sneeze, every dropped item, every unexpected event could be subtly attributed to their unlucky hand. You would sense the quiet tension, the almost imperceptible glances as people registered which hand you used to pick up a dropped coin or wave a farewell. The world whispered its prejudices, and the lefty heard them. Even in the rustle of leaves or the creak of a door, from the shadowy world of superstitions, your thoughts might turn to how left-handedness was depicted in the more formal, often didactic realm of artistic depictions. Medieval art, rich with symbolism, frequently reinforced societal norms and beliefs, and the portrayal of handedness was no exception. You can learn a surprising amount from who held a sword in which hand. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval Christian iconography, right-handed gestures and positions were overwhelmingly associated with holiness, blessings, and divine power. Christ, saints, and virtuous figures were almost invariably depicted gesturing, blessing, or performing miracles with their right hand. The right side was the side of honor and salvation. You would see countless images of Christ enthroned, his right hand raised in benediction, a symbol of divine approval. Now for a quirky tidbit. Conversely, the left hand or left side was often subtly or sometimes overtly, associated with negative figures, sin, or the damned. Judas Iscariot, for instance, was occasionally depicted in medieval art as left-handed, or positioned on the left side of a scene when contrasting him with righteous figures. Demons, or figures engaged in treachery, might also be subtly emphasized as left. Imagine a medieval viewer, well-versed in visual symbolism, immediately picking up on these subtle clues, unconsciously associating left-handedness with moral failing. It was a silent, visual reinforcement of prejudice, wasn't it? Historians still argue whether the consistent right-hand bias in medieval art was a conscious theological directive to reinforce the right path, or simply an unthinking reflection of the prevailing societal right-handed majority. Was it deliberate symbolic messaging, or just an artistic reflection of reality? Regardless, the artistic representations would have constantly bombarded the medieval eye with the correct way of being, making any natural left-handed inclination feel even more out of sync with the divinely ordered world. You would stand before a vibrant fresco or a stained glass window, absorbing its message, feeling the weight of centuries of visual reinforcement, subtly telling you that right was always righteous, and left was, well, something else entirely. From the static symbolism of art, your thoughts move to the active realm of religious practice and the pervasive influence of handedness in ritual and religion. In medieval Europe, where faith permeated every aspect of life, the correct hand for sacred gestures was not just a matter of tradition. It was often imbued with deep theological significance. A mainstream historical fact is that in Christian liturgy and sacrament, the right hand was almost universally prescribed for blessings, making the sign of the cross, holding sacred objects, like the chalice or host, and performing priestly duties. This practice was deeply rooted in biblical tradition, where the right hand of God symbolized power, favor, and salvation. You would witness a priest consecrating the Eucharist, his right hand raised in solemn blessing, or a parent making the sign of the cross over their child, always with the right hand. To use the left would be considered deeply disrespectful, even sacrilegious. Now for a quirky tidbit. While outright use of the left hand for blessings was forbidden, the medieval church sometimes had to address the practical reality of left-handed individuals. Rather than outright excommunication, some pragmatic solutions might have involved special instructions for left-handed priests, perhaps teaching them to perform blessings in a way that appeared to be right-handed, or to use their right hand even if it felt awkward. Imagine a naturally left-handed priest, his movements slightly stiffer, perhaps, as he consciously forces his right hand to perform the sacred gestures that feel unnatural to him. It's a silent struggle of faith and physiology, isn't it? Or if it was also a means of reinforcing societal conformity and discouraging individual deviation. Was it theological necessity or cultural pressure disguised as divine law? Regardless, for a left-handed person in medieval Europe, their natural inclination was constantly at odds with the most sacred acts of their daily life. You would feel the gentle, rhythmic cadence of the church service, the hushed reverence, and the undeniable pressure to conform, even in the most spiritual moments. The very act of worship became a subtle test of one's ability to subdue their natural self in favor of the right way. From the sacred gestures of the church, your thoughts drift to the formative years of a medieval child, where the pervasive Bias against left-handedness translated into direct action, education, and correction. This wasn't about nurturing a child's natural abilities. It was about systematically retraining them to conform to the right-handed world. A mainstream historical fact is that throughout medieval Europe, and indeed for centuries afterward, it was common practice to actively discourage, and often forcibly, correct left-handedness in children. Parents, teachers, and even nannies would employ various methods to compel a child to use their right hand for writing, eating, and performing daily tasks. This could range from gentle encouragement to tying a child's left hand behind their back, or even administering light corporal punishment. You would imagine a young child instinctively reaching with their left hand, only to have it gently but firmly redirected day after day, until the right hand became the default. It was a relentless process of behavioral modification. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some methods of correction were surprisingly ingenious, if a little alarming to our modern sensibilities. For example, special tight sleeves were sometimes used on the left arm, or mittens were worn on the left hand to make its use cumbersome or impossible. This wasn't about malice, but rather a perceived duty to ensure the child conformed to societal and religious expectations, believing it was for their own good. Imagine a medieval child, frustrated and perhaps a little confused, trying to eat their gruel with an awkwardly restricted left hand, simply because their innate preference was deemed wrong. It sounds less like nurturing and more like a subtle form of physical re-education, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the long-term psychological effects of this forced conversion were significant for medieval individuals, or if the cultural pressure was so overwhelming that most simply adapted without lasting trauma. Was it detrimental to development or a necessary socialization? Regardless, the practice highlights the depth of the cultural bias against left-handedness. You would hear the quiet sighs of exasperation from parents, the gentle clink of a spoon as a child struggled, and sense the unspoken societal agreement that left-handedness was a habit to be broken, not a trait to be celebrated. The playground of medieval childhood was, for the lefty, a subtle training ground for conformity. Given the relentless pressure to conform, your thoughts might turn to the very rare instances where a left-handed individual might have risen above. The pervasive bias, the case of royal lefties. Were there medieval monarchs or high-ranking nobles who defied the norm, or did they, too, succumb to the pressure of societal expectation? A mainstream historical fact is that clear, undisputed evidence of historically prominent left-handed figures from the medieval period is remarkably scarce. This scarcity is likely due to the widespread practice of forced conversion to right-handedness from childhood, as well as the cultural tendency to simply not record such deviations. If a royal figure was naturally left-handed, it's highly probable that they were trained to be ambidextrous or to exclusively use their right hand for public and ceremonial duties. You would expect a monarch to embody perfection and conformity, making any outward sign of left-handedness highly unlikely in official portraits or records. Now for a quirky tidbit. While concrete examples are rare, some historians and enthusiasts have speculated about a few possible left-handed historical figures based on indirect evidence or later anecdotes. For example, some artistic depictions of certain knights or historical figures, when examined closely, might show subtle indications of left-handed sword-wielding, but these are often debated and not definitively proven. Imagine a lone, slightly awkward figure in a tapestry, his sword held in a way that just feels different, sparking centuries of quiet historical debate. It's like searching for a hidden message in plain sight, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the lack of documented left-handed rulers implies that natural left-handedness was successfully suppressed in the elite, or if it means that royal training was so effective that they simply appeared right-handed for all public functions. Was it utter conformity or simply brilliant disguise? Regardless, the very absence of prominent left-handed figures in medieval royal annals speaks volumes about the societal pressure to conform, even for those at the very top. You would sense the profound weight of expectation on a royal child, knowing that every gesture, every movement had to project an image of perfection, leaving no room for a natural yet sinister inclination. The throne, it seems, was quite literally reserved for the right. Given the pervasive societal pressure and the lack of overt left-handedness in prominent historical figures, your curiosity might turn to the more subtle clues, the quiet hints of left-handed existence hidden in the margins of medieval life. A mainstream historical fact is that evidence for left-handedness in the medieval period often comes from unexpected and indirect sources. For instance, archaeological digs might reveal where patterns on tools or weapons that suggest left-handed use, even if the tools themselves were designed for right-hand. Similarly, careful examination of ancient manuscripts can sometimes reveal subtle shifts in ink flow or quill pressure that indicate a scribe struggling to write right-handed, or occasionally a rare instance of clearly left-handed script in a private note or an informal doodle in the margins. You would become a historical detective, looking for the quiet anomalies that betray a different reality. Now for a quirky tidbit. One of the more fascinating pieces of evidence comes from the practicalities of everyday life that were harder to control. Consider a medieval cook stirring a pot, or a laundress scrubbing clothes, activities where the dominant hand would naturally assert itself, regardless of societal pressure. Or imagine a rare instance of a left-handed medieval toilet designed with the toilet paper holder on the left side, if such a thing even existed, which is highly unlikely, but you get the idea. These small, unrecorded actions might have been the true domain of the medieval lefty. Historians still argue whether the scarcity of direct evidence for left-handedness means it was genuinely rare despite biological consistency due to successful suppression, or if its signs are simply too subtle and ephemeral to be easily detected in the historical record. Was the suppression total, or are we simply not looking hard enough? Regardless, these quiet clues in the physical and material culture offer a tantalizing glimpse into a hidden aspect of medieval daily life. You would sense the quiet, unrecorded lives of those who navigated a world designed against them, leaving behind only the faintest of imprints. The faint, almost invisible, scratch marks on a medieval tool become poignant testaments to the quiet perseverance of left-handedness in the right-handed world. Beyond the tangible and the historical, your thoughts turn to the unspoken rules of social interaction. In medieval Europe, where gestures carried profound meaning, the choice of hand for a greeting or a gesture of trust was not a trivial matter, and for the left-handed, it added another layer of social complexity. A mainstream historical fact is that the right hand was universally the hand of greeting, alliance, and oath-taking in medieval Europe, deeply rooted in both practical and symbolic reasons. Offering your right hand showed that you were unarmed and extended trust. It was also the hand used for blessings and pledges. You would see lords clasping right hands to seal treaties, merchants shaking hands on a deal, and common folk greeting each other with a firm right-handed grasp. For a naturally left-handed person, offering the wrong hand could be seen as awkward at best, suspicious or disrespectful at worst. Now, for a quirky tidbit to navigate this social minefield, some left-handed individuals might have developed a habit of subtly, almost instinctively, extending their right hand for greetings, even if it felt unnatural. This required a constant, conscious effort to override their natural inclination for every social interaction involving a handshake. Imagine a medieval lefty, perhaps practicing in private, ensuring their right hand was always ready for a polite, conventional greeting, even as their left hand yearned to lead. It sounds like a constant, low-level social anxiety, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the social pressure to use the right hand for greetings was primarily about maintaining social order and preventing perceived affronts, or if it had deeper, unwritten connections to the symbolic prejudices against the left side. Was it about politeness, or about reinforcing a deeper cultural bias? Regardless, the etiquette around hand gestures created another subtle but persistent challenge for the medieval left-hander. You would feel the gentle, unspoken pressure of social norms, guiding your hand as instinctively as the river guided its flow. The very act of greeting became a silent reminder of the ubiquitous expectation to conform, even in the simplest, most human of interactions. From the subtle pressures of social etiquette, your mind turns to the darker side of medieval society's intolerance for left-handedness, the instances of punishment and deviance. While not widespread official policy, the pervasive negative associations could, in extreme cases, lead to harsher treatments or accusations for those who stubbornly clung to their natural inclination. A mainstream historical fact is that while there weren't specific laws against left-handedness in most medieval European legal codes, the deep-seated cultural and religious prejudice sometimes manifested in accusations of witchcraft, sorcery, or association with the devil. This was particularly true during periods of heightened religious fervor or witch hunts. If someone was already suspected of deviant behavior, being left-handed could be used as corroborating evidence of their unholiness or connection to dark forces. You would hear hushed whispers in the village, attributing misfortune to the left-handed one, even if their only crime was their natural handedness. Now, for a quirky tidbit, in some extreme isolated cases, parents or authorities might have resorted to harsh physical methods beyond simple tying, like beatings or even minor mutilation, though this is extremely rare and not typical, to force a child to abandon their left hand. This was born of a misguided belief that they were saving the child from sin or misfortune. Imagine the fear of a young child punished for an action as innocent as reaching for a toy with their preferred hand, simply because it was deemed wrong by the adults around them. It certainly paints a bleak picture of the pressures to conform, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the instances of severe punishment or persecution against left-handed individuals were truly widespread or if they were isolated, extreme manifestations of general societal prejudice. Was it a systemic oppression or just the dark fringes of superstition? Regardless, the pervasive negative connotations meant that being left-handed could, in certain contexts, be a dangerous trait. You would feel the chilling weight of suspicion in the air, the fear that a natural inclination could be twisted into an accusation of deviance. The subtle acts of societal pressure could, under the wrong circumstances, escalate into something far more sinister, making the quiet life of a medieval left-hander a precarious balance between conformity and survival. After navigating the myriad challenges faced by the medieval left-hander, from linguistic prejudice to societal pressure and the subtle threat of superstition, you're left with a profound sense of their quiet perseverance. This historical exploration reveals how a deeply ingrained bias, once so pervasive, still subtly shapes our world, particularly in the echoes in language that surround us today. A mainstream historical fact is that many modern European languages, including English, retain vestiges of the medieval bias against left-handedness. Think of the word sinister, directly from the Latin for left, carrying connotations of evil or threat, or the French gauche, meaning left, which also means clumsy or awkward. Even in English, left-handed compliment implies something insincere or ambiguous. You constantly use these words, perhaps without realizing their ancient, biased origins. Imagine a medieval person hearing these words daily, reinforcing the societal message of their wrongness. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while we no longer explicitly punish left-handedness, the design of many everyday objects still subtly favors right-handed people. Scissors, can openers, computer mice, and even spiral notebooks often pose minor ergonomic challenges for left-handers, a quiet echo of those medieval tools. Imagine a left-handed person in a modern office, constantly adjusting to a right-handed world, a subtle continuation of the ancient struggle. It makes you wonder if some biases are so deeply embedded they persist in the very fabric of our manufactured environment, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the persistence of these linguistic and practical biases is a result of inertia from past prejudices, or simply a reflection of the continuing statistical majority of right-handed individuals. In the population, is it historical hangover or practical design? Regardless, the curious case of medieval left-handedness offers a gentle reminder of how seemingly minor biological differences can become profound cultural battlegrounds. You can now let the images of dimly lit scriptoriums, clanging battlefields, and bustling medieval markets softly recede. The whispers of old superstitions, the faint sounds of quills scratching, and the quiet struggle for conformity fade into the comforting quiet of your own space. Feel the warmth of your covers, the gentle support beneath you. Release any lingering thoughts of ancient biases or persistent linguistic quirks. The day's history lesson is complete, and the night is here to hold you gently. Let your breathing slow, deep, and even, like the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Imagine the softest moonlight filtering through your window, casting a silver glow, reassuring and calm. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, a comforting weight, signaling the final surrender to rest. Drift away on that feeling, knowing that sleep is a gift and it is now yours to embrace. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From the clatter of Roman wagons under a starlit sky to the soft rustle of a straw mattress. We've explored the surprisingly complex world of ancient Roman sleep. You've imagined the faint scent of lamp oil, the murmur of distant voices, and the quiet relief of a communal bath. Now, as the last echoes of those ancient nights fade, allow your own world to grow hushed. Let the gentle hum of your surroundings become a comforting background, a soft blanket for your thoughts. Feel the warmth of your covers, the gentle support beneath you. Release any lingering thoughts of ancient philosophers or sleepless emperors. The day's work is done, and the night is here to hold you gently. Let your breathing slow, deep, and even, like the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Imagine the softest moonlight filtering through your window, casting a silver glow. Reassuring and calm, allow your eyelids to grow heavy, a comforting weight signaling the final surrender to rest. Drift away on that feeling, knowing that sleep is a gift and it is now yours to embrace.